We live in a world divided. On one hand, we see immense wealth and prosperity. Billionaires launch rockets into space and technology advances at an unprecedented pace. On the other hand, millions struggle to make ends meet. They face stagnant wages, rising living costs, and a future riddled with economic uncertainty. This essay will delve into the issue of wealth inequality, focusing on the UK and the US. We will explore the concept of the wealth grab and examine how policies, market forces, and economic structures contribute to this growing problem. By understanding the mechanisms behind wealth concentration, we can begin to formulate solutions for a more equitable future. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening at an alarming rate. This trend, often referred to as the wealth grab, sees a disproportionate amount of wealth flowing towards the top echelons of society, leaving the majority behind. The extent of wealth inequality in the UK and the US is staggering. In the UK, the richest 1% of the population owns over 25% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 50% own a meager 9%. This means that a tiny fraction of the population holds more wealth than half of the country combined. The situation is similarly alarming in the US, where the top 1% owns a staggering 35% of all wealth, leaving the bottom 90% to share the remaining two-thirds. For the majority of people in the UK and the US, struggling to afford basic necessities like housing, healthcare, and education is a daily reality. The concentration of wealth at the top limits social mobility, stifles economic growth, and undermines democratic principles. The implications of this wealth gap are far-reaching. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a select few creates a system where opportunities are limited for the majority. It perpetuates a cycle of poverty and limits social mobility, making it incredibly difficult for people to climb the economic ladder. Furthermore, this disparity undermines the very fabric of our democracies. The concentration of wealth is not a natural phenomenon. It's not simply a case of the hard-working rich and the lazy poor. Instead, it is the result of a complex interplay of factors, many of which are deliberately designed to favor those at the top. This systematic transfer of wealth from the many to the few is what we refer to as the wealth grab. One of the primary drivers of the wealth grab is the erosion of labor unions and collective bargaining power. In the past, unions provided workers with a platform to negotiate for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. However, decades of anti-union legislation and corporate lobbying have significantly weakened unions, leading to stagnant wages and a decline in worker power. Another key factor contributing to the wealth grab is the rise of financialization. This refers to the increasing dominance of the financial sector in the economy, where profits are often generated through speculation and complex financial instruments, rather than through productive investments in the real economy. The global financial system, riddled with tax havens and loopholes, plays a significant role in exacerbating wealth inequality. Tax havens are countries or jurisdictions with low or no taxes, offering secrecy and anonymity to individuals and corporations seeking to shield their wealth from taxation. These havens, often shrouded in secrecy, allow wealthy individuals and corporations to avoid paying their fair share, depriving governments of trillions of dollars in tax revenue. The lost revenue from tax avoidance and evasion has severe consequences, particularly for public services. Governments rely on tax revenue to fund essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. When the wealthy shirk their tax obligations, it is the poorest and most vulnerable in society who bear the brunt of the consequences, facing cuts to essential services and a decline in living standards. The use of tax havens is not just a moral issue, it's an economic one. When wealth is hidden offshore, it's not being invested in productive activities that create jobs and stimulate economic growth. Instead, it often sits idly in accounts, further widening the gap between the super-rich and everyone else. The housing crisis, particularly acute in major cities across the UK and the US, is a stark illustration of wealth inequality in action. Skyrocketing property prices, fueled by a combination of factors including low interest rates, limited housing supply, and speculative investment, have made home ownership a distant dream for many. This has led to a surge in renting, with a growing number of people trapped in a cycle of paying exorbitant rents that eat away at their incomes, leaving little room for savings or investment. The financialization of housing, where homes are increasingly viewed as investment assets rather than places to live, has exacerbated the crisis. Large institutional investors, including private equity firms and hedge funds, are buying up properties, further driving up prices and pushing out individual buyers, particularly first-time homeowners. The consequences of the housing crisis are far-reaching. The lack of affordable housing options leads to overcrowding, displacement, and increased homelessness. It also has a significant impact on social mobility, as those who are priced out of home ownership are denied the opportunity to build wealth through property, a traditional pathway to financial security. Furthermore, the housing crisis contributes to geographical inequality. The consequences of unchecked wealth inequality extend far beyond the economic sphere, casting a long shadow over our societies. Rising inequality erodes social cohesion, fuels political polarization, and undermines trust in institutions. When the gap between the rich and the poor widens, it creates a sense of unfairness and resentment, leading to social unrest and instability. Moreover, high levels of inequality are detrimental to public health. Studies have shown a strong correlation between income inequality and a range of health problems, including mental health issues, obesity, and lower life expectancy. This is partly due to the stress and anxiety associated with financial insecurity, as well as the unequal access to healthcare and healthy living conditions. The social fabric of a society is weakened when there is a significant gap between the haves and the have-nots. It creates a society where people are less likely to trust each other, where social mobility is limited, and where opportunities are not shared equally. This can lead to a decline in civic engagement, as people become disillusioned with a system that they perceive as rigged against them. Furthermore, high levels of inequality can undermine democratic values. While this essay has focused on the UK and the US, it's important to recognize that wealth inequality is a global phenomenon. From rising inequality in emerging economies to the persistence of poverty in developing countries, the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few is a global challenge that requires global solutions. International cooperation is essential to address the issue of tax havens and financial secrecy. Governments need to work together to establish a global financial system that is transparent, accountable, and fair, ensuring that corporations and wealthy individuals pay their fair share of taxes regardless of where they operate or reside. The interconnected nature of the global economy means that solutions to wealth inequality cannot be confined to national borders. The flow of capital, goods, and services across borders requires international cooperation to ensure that the benefits of globalization are shared more equitably and that the rules of the game are not rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful. Addressing global wealth inequality requires a multi-pronged approach that tackles the root causes of inequality. Addressing wealth inequality requires strengthening workers' rights and progressive tax reforms. Raise the minimum wage, promote collective bargaining, and ensure decent work opportunities. Implement progressive tax policies, close tax loopholes, and consider wealth taxes. Use revenue to fund public services and boost the economy. Address money in politics with campaign finance reforms and transparency. Empower citizens to ensure policies reflect the needs of the many. The growing chasm between the rich and the poor is not an inevitable outcome of economic forces. It is a consequence of policy choices and systemic biases that favor the wealthy. It is a problem that we can solve, but only if we are willing to challenge the status quo and demand a more just and equitable society. We need a fundamental shift in our economic thinking, one that prioritizes the well-being of all people, not just the accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few. This requires a commitment to social justice, economic fairness, and democratic principles that ensure everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. The fight against wealth inequality is not just about economics. It's about justice, fairness, and the kind of society we want to live in. It's about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their background or circumstances. It's about creating a world where everyone has a fair shot at a decent life, where hard work is rewarded, and where everyone can share in the prosperity of our societies. The time for action is now.